friends brought me here. They were in a fraternity, and they showed me, what that life was like. I went to a bonfire. I rode a dirt road for the first time. I never really knew those existed.
What's up, everybody? My name is Adam, and I'm the host of the UKnowAdamTsang podcast, the show that is dedicated on bringing on passionate people, learning about their stories, and delivering value to entrepreneurs. So if that's what you're interested in, go ahead and follow, like, and subscribe. You know what I'm saying?
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the UKnowAdamTsang podcast, where you get to know just a little bit more about people, passions, and all things business. This week has been the first week that we're in a little bit of a different setup, and I'm so excited to bring on our first guest in the new podcast studio. I have Jake from ScoopMe, who has developed an app to compete against some of the biggest corporations in the United States.
What's going on, guys? It's good to be here.
So, Jake, I have to introduce you to the audience, make sure that, we get your story right. But I think everything started really with something called the infamous Burke Uber.
Correct, yeah. So to give the audience just a little bit about myself, I'm a senior here at Georgia Southern University. I transferred here my freshman year.
Okay.
I actually went to play football at a Division II college in South Carolina. And
What position did you play?
I was actually offensive lineman. You might not be able to tell it,
Oh, yeah?
based on how I look now, but I was, 80 pounds heavier then. And so, yeah, we've came a long way since then, but, I was in love with football, so that drove me to South Carolina, where I played at Limestone. The D2 was not for me. The football was great. I loved my teammates and hanging out with them, but there was only 600, students at the school.
Yeah.
And coming from a high school north of Atlanta with 3,000, that was, a big change for me. And I got there and I really was missing that college experience. And I came down to Georgia Southern for a football game. I played App State, and it was, that's the rival game. That's the biggest day of the year for football and partying. And so my friends brought me here. They were in a fraternity, and they showed me, what that life was like. I went to a bonfire. I rode a dirt road for the first time. I never really knew those existed. That was super cool, and I just never looked back. I a couple weeks later put in my transfer request. I felt like I was good enough to make the football team here at Georgia Southern.
Okay.
I compared myself to a lot of the guys here, and I thought that I stacked up, equally. I made the transition over, took the leap and transferred, and that is right when the pandemic actually started going on.
Wow.
And so it was a little, wrench in my plans of walking onto the football team here, because the COVID pandemic, affected everything. Everything was getting shut down, and so I think what happened at first was the original tryout got canceled. And so I ended up having to, suspend that tryout process another 6 months and try out again in the fall, where I did go on to make the team.
Okay.
And this COVID stuff was still happening, still going on. And basically another, few months passed by. I basically spent the spring practice with the team. They decided to let me go and cut me for no other reason than that they ran out of roster spots, is what they told me. Apparently, they got some extra roster spots due to COVID, because some guys were sick and that sort of thing. But the main thing is, they just had to cut these 15 roster spots, is what they told me. And so, that kind of ended my football career prematurely. It was a little, tough time in my life where I had to sort of find myself and find, another passion to sort of fulfill my competitive, needs.
What'd that feel like when that happened? You remember getting the news?
Yeah, it was tough. I literally found out over, I got a text from the offensive line coach, and I was working out at the rack. Like, I was doing extra workouts. I get a text from him. I'm like out of breath, like, what's up, coach? And he tells me to call him. And he was telling me that, they had these extra roster spots due to COVID, and that, now, unfortunately, that COVID is over. They have to cut me for that reason. And basically, I took it pretty tough. I felt like I was
Were you
better.
performing at that time in your mind?
Yeah, I was competitive with, second and third string. The first string center, which is the offensive line position I played, he was really good, but he was a senior.
Yep.
And I still had 2 or 3 years left of eligibility. So I felt like, give me a year or two and I could, really work my way up and play for these guys. Throughout the pandemic, I did lose like 30 pounds just switching schools and not being on a football diet.
Okay.
When I was at Limestone, they were feeding me 3-4 meals a day, just trying to get me as big as they can because at the offensive line position, that is what matters. So
Sure.
lost some weight just because I value my health. I was in the gym 2 times a day trying to get better and better at football, so I would make the team. And then ultimately it just didn't end up working out. So skip past that. As that pandemic period was happening, I created basically a system for sharing rides among our college campus, Georgia Southern. I lived out in a neighborhood with my sister my freshman year. A lot of students are forced to live in the dorms, and I got moved out to Burke because my sister lived there. And one thing I noticed is they have this large community group chat on GroupMe, and it was a very tight-knit, bonded community where if it's 1 a.m, you're making brownies and you need 2 eggs, you can ask in there and somebody will help you out and give it to you.
And
I thought
this is called Burke. So
Burke
for people that might have never heard of Burke, it is Burke Halter Plantation.
Yes, sir.
And how many homes would you say is in this area?
Burke is like the hot spot for college living, and
Why?
It's just where everything goes on. That's where a lot of the older students live, and there's multiple other neighborhoods that surround it. But in Burke, I would say there's probably 250 maybe houses, maybe 100. It's kind of hard to gauge that. But there's an old Burke that's been there for, if I had to guess, 20, 30 years, and that's where I'm living. And then there's just been a new section built on, and they just keep expanding it. I'm sure Paul Newman. He's always
beast.
working and expanding his stuff. So it's been great living out there, and the community is just what stands out the most to me. It's really cool, and I never really experienced anything like that.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of like describing it, right? So we're looking at maybe 250 homes. How many square foot would you say a home sits on?
This is just standard college living. It's four rooms.
Okay.
And me personally, we have two girls that are always staying over there, so we got like 6 people packed into this tiny house. And
then it sits on some land, right?
Right. Yeah. Burke is, compared to other college living, it's actually quite open, and
Yep.
that's what makes it unique. Is you'll have kids riding by on 4-wheelers, and sometimes you'll even hear gunshots. It sounds like World War II out there, where these kids doing stupid stuff, drinking and shooting guns. But
4-wheelers, I think, are very prominent in there.
Right. My freshman year, there was a 4-wheeler track that actually went behind my house. So at 4 a.m., I would always hear them coming by, and that was always waking me up. But something you get used to living out there in Burke.
It's an interesting thing, kind of like for the Statesboro area, because typically if you have a limit of land, you are forced to really kind of like compact everybody into like a space, right? And so that's what really like the apartments are. Whereas Burke, it allows for kind of like, the outdoors. You have kind of like the woods surrounding you. You mentioned that there are 4-wheeler trails.
Trails, yeah. Like everything in Burke is really connected, and everybody knows everybody. And that's a cool thing. Like I can, pick out 10 different friends at 10 different houses in Burke. And the cool thing is there's always, a party going on every single day. There's always a late night going on. There's always a darty going on. There's always something to do in Burke. It's like its own, utopia community of drunk college students. And that's sort of what, gave me that idea for the whole Burke Uber thing is all these kids need rides. And in Statesboro, there's really just not a supply of those affordable, safe rides.
Yeah.
And, what sort of led me to the whole idea of Burke Uber was somebody was complaining in that community group chat about this exorbitant price for a Uber ride.
Sure.
They were saying that from the plaza, which is only about 10 minutes from Burke, where the bar was at the time, was a $25 ride for a small Uber.
Do you think that was like surge pricing?
What affected it was the pandemic. Uber actually raised their prices by about 40% whenever the pandemic happened. And one thing that a lot of people haven't sort of recognized and fought back against is that they raised them in 2019, 2020, and they're still there. And I think they just tried to sort of get away with that and hope that, users and consumers would chalk that up to inflation or whatever it might be. But they haven't came back down on those prices.
Gotcha.
And that was sort of when I, just moved to this new town, didn't have a job, didn't know anybody, and the one thing I did have was a car. So I began leveraging my vehicle, and I had 7 seats at the time, and I did a little bit of math. And if I gave 3 rides to that bar in an hour, I could make better than minimum wage.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I was just driving around listening to music. So it was a really, really cool idea, but at first it was sort of not accepted. And I mean that by in the first week, I probably had 3 people text me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they realized that it's just some college kid that just wants to make some extra money. And he's got a bunch of seats in his car. Like, he doesn't care if you wear your seatbelt. Well, if you're in the front seat, I do. But he doesn't care, how many people you can cram into the back. He's always playing, the most relevant music. And it's just a cool user experience compared to Uber or Lyft, where, you hit a button and then you never know who's going to show up.
Sure.
You never know, if they might barely speak your language or if you have anything in common with them, you know? So it was a cool aspect for these students. And so those few that texted me that first week, told their friends, and they told their friends. And eventually, it sort of led to so many people texting me that I had to create a separate group chat for, this whole process of somebody texting you for a ride.
So we have this utopia kind of like quote unquote like Burke Halter area, and you mentioned that there's this group chat, right? And then you're able to kind of communicate with one another through that group chat because it's like this community. And then you mentioned that at some point people started texting you. Is that still through the group chat they were messaging you, or like were you posting like saying that you were giving rides at that point in time? And how did that transition?
So yeah, when it first started, it was a little bit competitive. I mean, once the sort of concept came to be, it was like, oh, I have a car too, and I can do this.
Sure.
I live in Burke, and
Sure.
This guy's making $5 to $10 a ride, and making pretty good money comparable to somebody working at a restaurant around here or a bartender. So it became very quickly a competitive
landscape.
Right. And so some other drivers and myself would basically just post a short message into the community group chat saying that we were giving rides, at a certain time frame for a certain amount of money, and we can seat a certain amount of people. And from that, we would obviously get leads to go and give those rides. So, and the main thing there, comparing it to Uber, is Uber obviously is taking a cut of each ride, and they're taking on average about 50% of whatever the person pays for the ride. So say you pay $10, your driver's only going to get 5 of that.
Yeah.
On this service where, students are just texting each other individually and paying each other through personal means like cash, Venmo, Cash App, whatever it may be, there is no rake back to the business or the organization at that point. So, that sort of led to, a large growth very quickly of this sort of concept of, oh, I can text somebody and, save 50% compared to Uber. It sort of bought on real quickly.
In such a kind of, competitive landscape, how were you able to take control of kind of like and direct the narrative, if you will?
I would say a big part of it was just the fact that I was the first to do it.
Yeah.
I sort of pioneered, this new idea of that something like this was even possible. And to me, it didn't even seem that crazy or abstract at the time. It was just, I have this and I can provide this service for these people. You know what I'm saying? I saw the problem and implemented a solution, at the very start. And what I also did throughout the, months and years of me driving was build a, fantastic reputation with my customers. And this summer, I'm still giving rides. I've been doing it for 3 years now. I've built up a long list of recurring customers and, users that trust me and know that if they text me and I say that I'm coming, I'm actually going to come. And it just brings up an issue, reliability in this texting manner is like, that's something that can come up is if you text somebody, you never know, they may or may not show up, but building a reputation with somebody and delivering on that every single time. The consistency part is huge in entrepreneurship. If they know what they're going to get and you can consistently deliver, then, they're more likely to text you than the next guy.
So, you've kind of started working on developing your fan base, developing kind of clientele. And you said that there's like this immense amount of growth that happened. Is this still happening all in this community group chat, if you will?
No. So after about 6 months, this concept blew up so much that the owner of that community group chat, he was an older student that was still living in the neighborhood, decided that this, enough is enough. I'm tired of people asking for rides, when I need whatever I need to talk about in a group chat. It's like Nextdoor, if people were to get on Nextdoor and use it for rides, it doesn't really make sense. And that was sort of his point of view, and I agreed with that. And so what we ended up doing was creating a separate group chat, and we called it the Burke Uber, because that was my name, that was what I went by, and it was sort of given to me by the students and by the people I was picking up. They're like, "Oh, you're the guy that's always Ubering people out to Burke. We should call you the Burke Uber." And so it sort of just stuck. And what ended up happening was I stuck a big fat Burke Uber sticker on my windshield. If you're in Statesboro, you might have seen it before. And that was probably one of the best marketing moves I've ever made.
Yeah.
What sort of gave me the idea, I don't know if you've ever seen Talladega Nights, where Ricky Bobby, he gets a sponsorship deal with Fig Newton. And he's driving in a NASCAR race with going 200 miles an hour, and he's got a Fig Newton sticker that he cannot see through, covering his entire windshield. But it's just funny because he references, I can't see anything right now, but I damn sure love Fig Newtons. And so that was sort of my thing, is like, it's free marketing. I've driven 80,000 miles over Statesboro over the past 3 years.
Wow.
And
how many rides does that equate to? How many rides do you think you've given over
if
these
I had to
past 3
estimate
years?
it, over 5,000. Over 5,000 rides.
That is wild.
I think I've probably picked up a quarter to half of Georgia Southern student body, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Good connections within that as well, right?
It led to sort of some crazy things, like you talked about a fan base. I don't really consider like the students my fans, but a lot of the time what will happen is students will be waiting outside of a bar to go in, or there's some line to get in, and I'll pull up to drop people off, and there'll be a group of people that know me, and they'll all just start screaming Burke Uber, and it's sort of a crazy thing. And people get in my car and they're like freaking out for whatever reason I can't figure out, but there's like, it's so crazy you started this thing, I'm so glad it's done this and this and this for me, and I'm so thankful, and that's great. But at the end of the day, it was just me taking action on that first initial step of like seeing a problem, implementing a solution, and like trying. I might have failed, but I was at least trying.
Where do you think that comes from, right? So you mentioned something in here that caught my attention. It's being able to execute, and when you say that you're going to be somewhere, to actually show up. And I'm sure that this was something that maybe some of your competition or people that were trying to get into this space weren't able to execute on. What kind of, in your opinion, led to your ability to do so, to basically be able to execute?
A quote that I think about is, you can define a man by his habits. And so early on, late in my high school career, I was developing good discipline, always in the gym for football. And I would say football led to a lot of that discipline as well. We were taught that, if you're on time, you're late, and, you better show up. If you got a doctor's appointment, you better like cancel it and make it another day. It's just the level of commitment you have to be a winner. I think in football and then in life and in business is like next level. And it stems from, discipline at the end of the day. You can be motivated, but you have to be able to, even when you're not motivated, still, get up, go to the gym, and, get to work right after that. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. So during this past 3 years, what have you learned? What challenges have you faced? What are the things that you have learned about this specific industry? Yeah,
so a little bit about me. I was not an entrepreneur about 2 years ago. I would call myself a semi-entrepreneur, where I was operating this group chat where it's not making any money, but I'm making money off of it, and other people are making money off of it. It was sort of like a business with employees but no revenue. And so I was learning a lot, about people mainly, but I was learning a lot about business during that point. But I when I said I got cut from the football team, and it was a lot to do with this coronavirus and these, extra roster spots. And I really, at the end of the day, felt like it was a political thing, and I didn't like how political I felt that college football and colleges in general are. And so I decided to actually change my major to now I have a emphasis in business and an emphasis in management, as well as a minor in education, because I was going down the education path because I wanted to be a football coach.
Got you.
And so halfway through my junior year, I was like coming up on graduation. It was basically the last chance, going into my last semester where I could change my major and still graduate on time. And I decided, I had the conversation with my parents, talked to my family, and just decided that I was going to take this leap. And, I felt like there was more money to be made in business than in education. At the time, I was student teaching actually as a group of kindergartner. It was elementary school, but K through 5th grade. I was teaching them a soccer lesson, and I loved sports growing up, and I loved football and baseball. But it was just like, in that moment, I didn't really feel like I was fulfilling my purpose. When I had this large opportunity with this large group chat, and big ideas on the other side of things, and so I decided to change my major and pursue the business and management path, and that was about 18 months ago. And so since then, basically the biggest lesson I've learned about entrepreneurship up until this point is you have to learn. You have to learn how to do it. And it's a learnable skill. And whenever I was considering that switch over to entrepreneurship, I felt like I was in a place where it was either this succeeds or I'm gonna be homeless. Like, it's either it works or I'm gonna be homeless. And that was my mentality at the time. But once I switched over and actually started to learn, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this now. I don't have to learn how to do it. Started, reading, listening to different business podcasts, and the main overlying message that I learned was you just have to keep on learning. And that's the thing, is you can stack these skills and deploy them. And Alex Hormozy talks about this skill stacking. Like, you can gather, Jay-Z will go and learn how to, produce music, and then he can learn how to, produce a record deal or produce a label. And by stacking all these skills, it ultimately turns into, a large CEO, large corporation, where he has the ability to, look at artists and determine if they're, any good at music. And it kind of just clicked with me, like, you have to learn. And and it's kind of funny, I was in education, but it took me getting out of that program to really realize this. And I think that might be partially due to like the curriculum nowadays, but you have to learn in order to be successful in anything. And I've been learning so much stuff over the past 18 months, and every day I just feel better and better about myself. At first, there was some imposter syndrome. I felt like, is this really my calling? Do I, am I really cut out to do this? But every day I just keep getting up and trying, and sometimes I fail, but the more and more I do it, the easier it gets. So.
What I think is astounding and absolutely inspiring about your journey is really how you have come across and pushed through. I think there's a ton of people out there that wish, that hope, that dream, right? And dreams are phenomenal. They're the thing that drives all of us. But the flip side of that is getting in kind of like the dirt and really like working to achieve those dreams. And I think that oftentimes is the gap of you have a great idea, but the execution is not there. And we'll get into kind of like how you've executed on this, next part. But before we get there, what advice would you have to, the people that have a phenomenal idea, or maybe they have something that has picked up some momentum, right? What would you tell them to try to push them to the point of putting in the work to get the idea off the ground?
Yeah, I would say you're going to have, great ideas come up along the way in any journey. I would say a big thing is enjoying the process. The man who loves walking will walk 1,000 miles and, never get tired of it. Where if you're just focused on the destination and just focused on, oh, we need to achieve this, this, and this, I feel like you'll never really feel achieved in those instances because you're always just seeking the next thing. If you can instead flip your mindset to like enjoy the journey and enjoy each step of the way, enjoy the failures, the successes, enjoy all of it. I mean, it's just part of life.
Really cool. So, you've grown quite a bit in terms of this group chat that you're managing. You're starting to bring people in. How big is that group chat in its current state right now?
Right. So over the 3-year span, we ended up getting about, we have 5,000 people in my group chat, my original Burke Uber group chat. And
is that the limit?
5,000 is actually the maximum that GroupMe can support. And so that's why we've sort of been looking at, other options in that area. But my chat ended up reaching 5,000, and before it did, I think it was at about 4,000 is when the Borough Girls Only group chat was created by my co-founder, Madeline. And to sum up her, reason for creating that was she saw an issue or another problem within my solution, and that was sometimes these girls are asking for rides, and these guys are texting him. And if it's a single girl, a lot of the time they don't feel comfortable getting picked up by a guy. And so what she did was she went and created another subgroup chat of the borough or of the Burke Uber, and it was basically girls only. And she mediated that, moderated that, and only allowed females to join and drive.
Did she talk to you about that before she did it? Or did she just kind of like went ahead and did it? Yeah,
she just did it.
And did you know her before she did that?
Oh, that was quite a while ago. I think I might have given her a ride or two, but we definitely weren't like on first name basis or anything like that.
Got you.
I sort of heard about the whole group chat, and I was like, well, that's a great thing. Obviously, girls. I was kind of upset I wasn't in it, but at the end of the day, I wasn't allowed to. So I was like, that's awesome. A lot of the times I think that girls don't want to ride with a guy, and that's perfectly fine. And her being our co-founder, it's sort of brought that whole ideal and the whole thought and brought the female perspective into the whole thought process, I would say.
That's really cool. So moving forward, you guys have these 2 group chats.
Well, actually, we have 3.
Okay.
Because when mine filled up to 5,000, I went ahead and created another one, and it's sitting at about 2,500 members now. So all 3 combined, because I always talk about them combined. We're a team, me and Madeline. We're sitting at over 12,000 users, and that's mostly students. There's just a handful, maybe 10 of those that if I had to guess, that are not students. But we've got 25,000 students at Georgia Southern, and I feel like we've captured, if not half, almost half of them.
That's amazing. Rideshare is a huge problem that you guys are solving right now. Love the fact that you're able to be able to provide a service at a better cost to the end consumer. There's definitely advantages. I love the fact that Madeline was able to create something really that was meant for girls, and kind of like trying to protect that experience. With these 12,000 users that you were able to accumulate over time, what was the next step that you took?
So let's see, about a year and a half ago, I gave a ride to a family. It was a family weekend, or parents weekend, sorry, where the sorority parents come down and they see their students and they go to the football game, do whatever, and I'm always the one driving them around because the parents pay really good.
I like it.
And so I pick up this dad, and he's riding in the front seat. Me and him are having a conversation about the whole group chat and how it works. He thought it was the coolest thing ever, and he mentioned that he was a business owner out of Atlanta. He actually owns a classic car business, and he sort of stress the fact that I have something here in this large group of users, this concept, and what we're doing here in Statesboro. I mean, we've essentially ran Uber and Lyft out. I mean, there's a couple of them. They've kind of returned recently to service like the local community that's not a student and can't use our service, but we've essentially ran a bunch of the Ubers and Lyfts out of Statesboro, and he was sort of appalled by that and urged me to take it to the next level, or at least explore options to take it to the next level. And so that's what I did. And I looked at, the processes that go into building an app or funding an app, funding a development team to build an app. And I learned very quickly that it's not a cheap process.
Yeah.
Nor is it, easy to receive investment for, a company that hasn't made any revenue yet. I've just learned all these little business lessons along the way, but sort of what it's led into now is we actually have an app, and we're actually operating on the App Store now.
What is it?
It's called ScoopMe.
Okay.
For those of you out there.
How did the name ScoopMe come around?
The way the name ScoopMe came was we actually had a team of 4 back in the day.
Okay.
And it was one of their names. We were originally going to go with a like a Uber type model, and have since shifted. And those 2 guys, they helped while they were students here, but they've since moved on to Denver and one other place, and have started their corporate lives. But that was the one thing that stuck with us from those guys was the name ScoopMe.
You said that there was 2 other people.
Right.
At what point were they kind of like part of the story?
Okay. So to take you back a little bit more, I think around 4,500 members in my group chat. So about 2 years ago, now they texted me, hit me up, and basically said, "Hey, we have this sick idea. We're gonna make an app and do all this cool Uber for student stuff."
Yeah.
And I thought, I have the same idea I just got a few months ago from this business guy.
Yep.
And these 2 guys at the time, I was still, teaching those kids how to kick soccer balls. These 2 guys were actually taking business classes, taking management classes, and they were a year older than me. So I felt, they believe in it. Who else would be better to help me in this endeavor than these 2 guys? And so we started meeting like weekly, working on things that, looking back, we shouldn't have been working on.
Like what? Like what?
Working on like a pro forma and, all these different things, planning out different aspects when, we should have been figuring out how much insurance costs and should have been figuring out, how hard it was going to be to get an investment or making those connections with investors. But just to sum it up, those 2, ended up going on and doing their own thing and, didn't really believe in it as much. But in the process, us 3 recruited Madeline, who is, and I pointed out the fact that she's got access to all these users, and also she's a girl, so we could add some equality to our team.
Yeah.
And so we decided to reach out to Madeline, and she soon joined the 3 of us and became a team of 4. And then I think it was December of this year, or it might have been it was December of this year, I think, or December of last year. Yeah. That those 2 decided to, stop responding and sort of break communication. And, me and Madeline just kept doing our own thing, and because we still believed in it. Obviously, we had access to the assets at the end of the day, and we were, still maintaining those. So we wanted to get something out of all that work we had put in over the past 2 years. So I feel like me and her were just more involved and, more determined to get it done. Yeah. And, back to, the app now, like we had to overcome all these obstacles in terms of like how me 21 years old, how the hell am I going to get an app built? How am I going to convince somebody to pay for an app to have built when I don't even they were telling me like, well, what's it going to do? Like, I'm like, it's going to give people rides. I'm like, Uber, they were like, Uber does that. I'm like, but listen, like people don't want to pay $25 for a ride.
Who are you trying to convince?
There's been a couple people. I would say Paul Newman was one.
Yeah.
There's been another parent actually. Well, one the first one was a lead from that the parent that I gave a ride to on
Classic
Parents
Cars.
Weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. He basically told me, here's this guy's contact info. Claimed he was a billionaire, and that lit my eyes up, real wide. I was like, I'm sure he wouldn't wouldn't mind writing me $100,000 check. And so I was communicating with him, had a long conversation with him, where he was mentioning data monetization and these long, big complex, revenue models that I just couldn't quite wrap my head around as somebody who wasn't even a business major yet.
Yeah.
So I think I was just, too early in the process, to be even talking to investors at that point. So that ended up not working. But since then, I've talked to, Paul Newman, and then as well another parent actually that came down and also loves the idea. Like, he'll come down and he'll pay me $100 for a ride and, give me like $10,000 worth of business advice on the way there. And so he also believes in the idea, and he's sort of the main investor that we have, like, if we need it.
Yeah.
Right now we're sort of trying to bootstrap and do things on our own and prolong that as long as we can.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward. We've kind of like, this is now starting to formulate into something that, you hope to turn into a business, right?
Yes, sir.
And so at what point do you get to the point where you have the ScoopMe app? How do you get there?
Right. So that was that, and the overall model of how we're going to operate was the two main things to figure out. Mainly, the model because of insurance. That was going to be the other main expense, as well as the app itself. And so I don't know what it set it off in my mind, but I remembered something back from one of my professors had told me. My original entrepreneurship professor, she actually was a developer and developed a online something or another, and she ended up selling it for like $900,000. So I took a lot of advice from her, and this was in like the pitching stage, and she was teaching me, sort of the stuff that I needed to sort of get the idea of a business instead of, actually how to operate on that. And what ended up happening was I remember back to her mentioning no-code software, because I was, stressing. I'm like, how am I going to get this investment? How am I going to convince somebody to do this? Blah, 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 blah. Considering a tech co-founder, what are my options there? Reached out to every computer science head in the Georgia Southern department. Nobody was getting back to me. Nobody could lead me to a developer, to build this thing for me. And so at the end of the day, I said to myself, like, well, fine, I'll just do it myself. And so got on. I was like, let me just learn how to use this no-code software. It can't be that hard. And it turns out it is very hard. It is not like Wix. It's not like a website, Squarespace building. It is very complex. And the front end is a lot like those website builders where you're just dragging and dropping. But learning the back end of how an app actually functions and how it communicates with the database, I knew nothing about that.
I cannot tell you because like the viewers don't and the listeners don't know this, but I've been kind of like, this is kind of like close to where I started like seeing you come through the space talking about the idea. And there's nothing that has impressed me more than your conviction of this idea and moving forward and developing it yourself. I really, that speaks volumes to your tenacity and a term that comes up often, which is grit. There's this almost like, hey, like whatever it takes type of thought process. And that to me is literally one of the most impressive things that I've been able to see like come through. Right. Like, and I think that that's a huge portion of like why I'm so in supportive of like the things that you're doing, is because that's not an easy task, right? Like and give people maybe an idea of like how challenging getting an app onto the App Store is.
I've been telling people recently when they've been asking, how the hell did you do that? Like, I didn't know you could make an app. And I was like, well, it was probably like the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I think, it's right up there. If not, it is, the hardest thing I've ever done in terms of like complexity and the amount that I was, amount of information that I was having to consume and amount of people I was having to contact. And some of them were tired of, listening to text messages from me and they don't even know about this stuff. And I was just trying to figure it out. And I feel like you talked about the tenacity and the grit. I feel like that is just necessary to be successful in this game of entrepreneurship. Like, you have to be willing to do the hard work and do the smart work as well, but do the things necessary for your business to succeed. It's like I saw your podcast with the guy from El Sombrero. He talked about working in the kitchen. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to do whatever it takes for my business to be successful. And like I told Madeline yesterday, like I have to do everything in my power to keep the business interests at the top of my priorities. It's not my own interests. I can't let my ego or these other things affect business decisions and that sort of thing.
Yeah. You mentioned the hardest thing that you've ever done. Talk to me about that specifically. There's obviously certain resources out there. I'm assuming that you watched a ton of YouTube.
Yep.
What other resources were you plugging into to make this a reality?
Yeah, so an interesting thing about the whole no code is when my professor actually told me that, she told me to use a service called Adalo. And when I got on it, I was just like, this is not going to work for what I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward a year later, I was taking another entrepreneurship class with another teacher, and I got, like I said, I remembered back to that no code. I was like, okay, let's check out if there's any other software that does no code app building. And it turns out there actually is, called Flutterflow. And Flutter is a common app code for iOS and Android apps. And this basically service, it makes it a whole lot easier for somebody that doesn't understand science or computer science stuff to create an app. And it makes it doable. I wouldn't say it makes it easy by any means. But it's only $70 a month, and you get access to create the app, deploy it to the App Store, push notifications, everything you need to do it yourself. It's just that, like, talking about the grit and tenacity is like, I think that first time when I checked out Adalo, a year or two ago, I was like, I'll just find an investment, or I'll just get somebody else to do this for me. Like, I don't have time to do this. And it came down to it. I was like, there's a stage of analysis paralysis where like you think about something for way too long and end up never acting on it. And I was just tired of that. I told people for a year that, I'm going to make an app. I'm talking to this investor. He's about to pay for this app. And I was just tired of it. And I was like, if this thing's going to be successful. And I learned, through my business knowledge that not taking on that investment and doing everything you can yourself is the right business decision. Minimizing your liabilities and, doing as much as you can on your own is best practice at the start. And hopefully, in the next year or so, we can start making some money and start, deploying our assets and leveraging other people to do, some of this work. But up until this point, a majority of it has fallen on me.
For you, what are the next steps for your application?
So we ended up launching, I don't know if I said, but we launched last Friday. It's been a week now, and last time I checked, we were up over 200 users. So my original goal was 110 days, so I blew that out of the water. We doubled it, and I'm very happy with the 200 users. Considering that it's summer, there's just not a lot of students in Statesboro. A lot of them are vacationing and are at home, and so we're actually, this weekend, we're putting things on hold a little bit, and then I think the next step for ScoopMe is to bring on a technical co-founder, to sort of somebody, now that the app's built, the idea's proven, and the want for it and the need for it has been proven by these 200 users. I think it would be in our best interest to bring on somebody to lend, the app work over to, and hopefully it should be super easy for them now that they're on that no-code platform, and so that they can work on that for a portion of time, and I can, turn my, objectives to building the business and scaling this thing as big as we need to and as quickly as we need to. And we're still working on sort of that outlook and working on that timeline. And hopefully, you could talk about that after this. But we have very big plans, and I can see this thing, taking over America by storm, very quickly.
I love it. I love the big dreams. So real quick for you, and I think this is extremely valuable advice since you have just gone through this. If you could start over at the beginning and let's talk about like kind of like in general, so that this can be really utilized as advice for other entrepreneurs. What do you think is the steps that you would have taken? Because there was probably some quote unquote wasted time, right? Like in terms of, I guess not necessarily wasted. I have to be careful with that word, but more along the lines of like, hey, we were working under pro forma instead of like, figuring out what the actual business is.
Right.
What steps should an entrepreneur take to validate the business to get it to the point of where you're at right now?
Right. Part of that, I want to like sort of say that trying and failing is part of the journey.
Okay.
And I learned so much throughout those times, and I'm now glad that I can look back and like realize that we were doing the wrong thing. And I would say that's probably the only way you're going to really figure things out. I mean, businesses are so different and so complex. A lot of the times, you can use other people's businesses and reflect sort of their processes and their operations. But in my industry, I'm basically building a new one. I mean, like it is very new and different, and so I can't really look at like the leading giants. I can look at similar companies, but I can't really look at somebody doing what we're doing because nobody is.
That's right.
And so hopefully we can just continue to build on that. And you talked about the advice for somebody starting the entrepreneurship process. I would say if you can, reach out to people in your space that are killing it. That's sort of what I did. There's not a whole lot of app people around here. They're probably all in Silicon Valley, but I tried to just reach out to as many people as I can, learn as much as I can, and just never quit at the end of the day. Like if you don't quit, then eventually you're going to be successful.
Love it. Jake, I have to thank you for coming on to the show. Absolutely inspired by your story. I'm so excited for the future. I think that, the potential that you've created is just immense. I love the model. I loved it from the day that we kind of like started talking about it. And super like, I think what is so special about your story, and the thing that I keep coming back to, is your grit and determination to see things through. Regardless of what happens, those two elements are going to take you extremely far in life and just continue to push.
Sir, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. And if anybody wants to check me out, I'm on Instagram _JM55. And then our ScoopMe Instagram is at ScoopMe.app. We are on the App Store now, only operating in Statesboro. So if you're at other schools, you're just going to have to wait out a couple months or maybe a year or so. But we're going to get there as soon as we can. It's just, part of the process. But again, I thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Cool.